Thank you so very much, Mayor. I appreciate that. Where'd you go? There you are. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you all for being here and for having me here. It is great to be in beautiful South Florida. Thank you so much for having us here. I feel very much at home in South Florida because I'm from Pennsylvania. And I know we have a few Pennsylvanians and New Jerseyans and New Yorkers, and this is old home for us. And I know there are probably a few Italians out here too, I would suspect, right? There you go. So it feels very, very much at home. I'm so excited to be here. I thank you all for coming out and being here with me today. As the mayor just eloquently stated, you know, and we have 3 races so far. We've had 3 winners so far, and now Florida can start to send the real winner on to the victory in the future, and I hope it's us. As the mayor just said, if you're looking for the candidate who is the vision for our country, the vision for Florida, the vision for our country, that's going to create prosperity, that's going to create a strong, solid foundation for our country, one that believes in free people, free markets, free enterprise, the dignity of human life, the centrality of the family, strong national security, a good friend to our allies. In other words, if you're looking for the real conservative, someone who is the Reagan model, then the answer is standing here today before you. I need your help and support. It is great. It is really great to be here. I mean, we felt very good about what happened in the last 24 to 48 hours at the end of the primary in South Carolina. We did pick up that win in Iowa that was a little belated, but nevertheless, a solid win for us. And I just put this in perspective. We've had 3 races. One in Mitt Romney's backyard in the state of New Hampshire. He owns a home in New Hampshire. He's campaigned there for 6 years. And as I said before, he was the governor of the neighboring state. Last night, we had a race in South Carolina, right across the border from where Newt Gingrich was, and pretty much his backyard and where he staked his claim. And they were able to win in their backyard. Well, there was one race that was in nobody's backyard. There was one race where you had to go out and on a level playing field compete, and we won that race. And we're going to go out and campaign all up and down the state of Florida. We believe, you can applaud any time when I say Florida, that's good. We believe our message, our track record, and our vision for the future, and the way we line up best. Look, this election's going to come down to who can best defeat Barack Obama and be able to do what's necessary to transform this country away from the statist model that Barack Obama has tried to impose on this country. Those are the 2 things. So it's real important. I mean, you know, look, Florida voters have an opportunity to really have the chance to sort of, now you've seen this race narrow to 3 candidates who can be president. You have 3 candidates who can be president. That wasn't the case moving into South Carolina. When South Carolina started, there were 5 or 6 candidates that were vying for the nomination in South Carolina, and it shrunk just a couple of days before, and it was sort of a mess. Well, Florida can now step back and say, okay, who do we want? Who is the candidate that we should, here in Florida, put our stamp of approval on? Who is the best candidate? Who's the best candidate? Thank you. I think you're getting the idea. Who's the best candidate? Who's the best candidate put up against Barack Obama, right? Who? And the reason is you gotta look at where this election's gonna be held. Everywhere talks about, well, this is a national race. That's true. But there are about 10 or 12 states where this election is going to be won or lost. And we need to look at the three candidates and say, well, who has the ability to go up toe-to-toe with Barack Obama in the states that matter? Let's just be honest. You're getting it. Let's just be honest. South Carolina is not a swing state in a general election. All right? The swing states in the general election are, you know them. Obviously, number one biggest swing state in the country is? There you go. All right? So number one is Florida. So you have a huge role to play here. So look at from the perspective of who's that candidate that can win Florida, that can win Pennsylvania, that can win Ohio, they can win Indiana, they can win Missouri, they can win Iowa, Wisconsin, Virginia, North Carolina. Look at those states and look at what they have in common. Look at those states and look at where a candidate who's coming forward, what their background is, their background both personally and professionally, what their background is, what their policies were, how they work for the American people, and what the vision is for our country. You got to look at all of those things and say, well, who is the person that lines up best? Who is the best contrast? And who has the message that can get the voters we need in these key states to be able to win this election? Right? You have appropriately jumped to the conclusion, but let me fill in why we're the best candidate to make that case and to win this election. We have three candidates in this race, three candidates who have a chance to become President of the United States. And those three candidates, they've won, again, 3 primaries. And let's look at those candidates and what they bring to the table. Let's look at their background. Let's look at what their roots are and how that connects to the voters. What the voters we need blue-collar Democrats. We need folks who are independents, who are looking for a strong leader with real convictions and courage to stand up and fight. Someone they trust. Trust is a big issue in this election. Who do you trust that is going to do what they say they're going to do? And so if you look at that, you look at the record, you look at a record of someone who was governor of Massachusetts and, well, didn't necessarily govern all that conservatively. You look at someone who was Speaker of the House. And again, these are friends. I know them. They're good people. But when Newt was Speaker of the House, well, within 3 years, the conservatives in the House of Representatives tried to throw him out. And in the 4th year, they did. Why? Because he wasn't governing as a conservative. He didn't live up to all of the hype. If you look at what he tried to do and what he accomplished, it just didn't match with what he said. If you look at my career and you look at what we were able to do when I was put in a position of leadership, every conservative who wanted something done on the floor of the United States Senate and they were having trouble getting it, or they were having an issue to get their votes or get to the floor, they came to me. We were the conservative firebrand. We were the ones standing up and fighting, not just for national security conservatives, not just for economic, not just for moral cultural, but across the board every single day. We were the person that conservatives went to. I was the go-to guy. The bottom line is, you can't just look at what people say during a campaign. You got to look at what they do when they're put in a position of power. You have to look at what they do when the pressure is on. And let me assure you, the pressure will be on. And who are you going to trust when that pressure is on? When they're in that debate? It's great to be glib, but it's better to be principled. It's better to have all of your ducks in a row. It's better to have someone of principle, someone who has been there, someone who's not afraid when they get accused of being intolerant or whatever the case may be, who stands up and says, I'm not. But I believe what I did was right. I believe that the principles of free people, free markets, free enterprise. I believe in the principles of building a great country from the bottom up, not the top down, is exactly what's best for America. Don't flinch. Don't waver. Don't bob and weave, but stand up proudly and strongly for the convictions that each and every one of you have and that you want to see from your leaders. Someone who believes in you, not big government. If you look at the biggest issues in this race, the biggest issue, single issue in this race is freedom. Whether America is going to be the country that believes in free people, or we are going to go to a status model like every other country in the world has done that says that the elites know better how to run your life than you do. And if you look at the biggest issues of the day that we're going to be debating in this race with President Obama, the number one issue, the reason I got in this race was Obamacare, was a government takeover of 1/6 of the economy. A government takeover, a section of the economy that's going to control each and every one of your lives. Why? Because they're going to control your access to health care. Ultimately, that's what Obamacare does. And so it is a game changer for America. It is the central issue of whether government taxation and regulation and control is the future of our country, or whether we still believe in you. We still believe in free people. Who is best able to stand up and fight that battle? Is it someone whose healthcare plan was the model for Obamacare? Was it someone who for 20 years, and I repeat this, for 20 years stood for the government, the federal government, being able to mandate that you buy private sector insurance? Well, for 20 years, Congressman Gingrich has demanded and encouraged and fought to get a mandate from the federal level, the very thing that the Attorney General in this country is fighting at the Supreme Court. Pam Bondi's fighting at the Supreme Court on the individual mandate, and for 20 years, up until last year, Speaker Gingrich supported that mandate. Now, how is it that we are going to have the contrast that is necessary for us to win in the general election if we have two candidates on the most important single issue that we're dealing with, freedom, and the freedom of our healthcare system, are badly compromised? We did this 4 years ago, folks. We did this model 4 years ago, putting someone up there who was a little bit more moderate to be able to appeal to moderate voters. It doesn't work. It didn't work with John McCain. It didn't work for Bob Dole. It doesn't work. What we need is a strong conviction conservative. We don't need someone who sits on a couch with Nancy Pelosi. We don't need someone. I mean, it's not as bad as sitting with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, but it's close. We need someone when it was easy. Think about this, folks. It was easy 5 or 6 years ago when everybody was saying, oh, well, we've got to do something on this fact of global warming. Everybody ran. Everybody went and said, oh, yeah, we have to do something. Oh, yeah, that's the in thing to be. Well, we don't want politicians who run for the in thing to be that the left creates in the media. It happens all the time. It will happen again. And we need someone who has the courage and the confidence to stand up and say, that's not true, this is a bad thing for America, and I'm not going to sit on the couch with anybody. I remember all of the intensity. I wasn't in Washington at the time, I was an observer. But I was commentating, I was writing a column, I was out there doing Fox News and commenting at the time. And I saw the intensity that was being put by, yes, both Democrats and Republicans on trying to bail out Wall Street in September of 2008. There was incredible pressure from both sides of the aisle. John McCain and Barack Obama ran to Washington to embrace the government coming in and bailing out the people who sold out America for profit, who sold out and created a destruction of the housing market of this country, all because they knew they had bad paper and kept selling it and making profit from selling. And we knew that, and they knew it. And yet, we all gathered together in the crisis and sold out the principles of America and created a great moral hazard that was reinstated by Dodd-Frank, that if you go ahead and you do that again, we'll bail you out again. Well, everybody's against Dodd-Frank now because, well, every Republican, well, it's obvious we don't want to bail them out again. Well, what about bailing them out the first time? Where were they the first time this happened? When we had the principle of government dramatically interfering with the private sector, putting your tax dollars at risk, bailing out people who did unethical, immoral, and even illegal things to profit at your expense. Where were they when it came to that? I can tell you where I was. I said, you know what, this country may suffer an economic decline, a deep one, but it will have even a deeper decline if we set the precedent for the American people and for the government of this country to step in and bail people out, bail out Wall Street, bail out the big banks, bail out the bad behavior, make sure that every one of them make a profit, while the rest of America, including South Florida, suffers from a housing depression as a result of what was done. One candidate of the three stood tall and said no to the bailout. The others said, oh, we don't like it, but you got to do it. If it's wrong, don't do it. Right? This is actually the frightening part of what you heard from these candidates on the Wall Street bailouts. They knew and they said it was wrong. And yet they felt pressure to do what was wrong and justify it as right. Ladies and gentlemen, we need someone who has stronger convictions and characters, understands the great nature of our country, the great nature of believing in our marketplace, believing in free enterprise, believing in the consequences, both destructive and constructive capitalism. That's how it works best. I find it really interesting that you saw Newt attacking Mitt Romney on the whole capitalism issue. I thought it was wrong. What I also thought was wrong was Mitt Romney standing up and saying he was a defender of capitalism when he was for the Wall Street bailout. You can't be for both. And again, a clear contrast. These are huge issues in this race. We need someone who's a visionary, someone who's willing to go out and paint a picture. People have asked me, how are you going to get things done in this election? How are you going to win, and how are you going to govern? The best way is to bring people together. We have a President of the United States who is not the Commander-in-Chief, he is the Divider-in-Chief. He is someone that goes out every single day, just like he did on the Keystone Pipeline, and picks his political group that he's gonna be for and divide it and try to say, oh, these guys, these folks over here are bad. They're folks who want to, who are into fossil fuels, which is a terrible thing, and it's always the good against the bad. A group that's for him pitting against another group. This is how the president wants to win this election, is by dividing America up by groups of people, by income, by ethnicity, by race. It's always about dividing for his own purpose. And what we need is someone who reminds us what unites us. And what unites us is, well, what makes us all Americans. What makes us all Americans? People who come to this country, and I'm sure there are recent immigrants here, people that come to this country like my father and grandfather did. They came, and as soon as they stepped foot in America, they became Americans. Why? Because they believed what Americans believed. Being an American is not being an ethnic group or a race or whatever it is, or a creed. Being America is believing in the foundational principles of our government, which were established in our Declaration of Independence. Right? I love the Tea Party. I have loved what they have done. I love what the Tea Party has done to revitalize a passion for our Constitution. It is absolutely important, and I love the fact that they not only go out and campaign and work, but they also hold all sorts of educational opportunities to talk about this, the Constitution of the United States. And it's a great blessing to have that rebirth and revitalization of the Constitution. But we have to understand that the Constitution is not the only consequential founding document. The other one is the Declaration of Independence. And you can't understand the Constitution unless you understand the role the Declaration of Independence plays. Right? And so, and this is important to understand that at the heart, the Constitution is the how of America. It's the operator's manual of America. But the why of America, who we are, is in the Declaration. And it's those words that all of you know and thank you, and learned when you were in school. Those words, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what makes America. It's not our Constitution which makes us different than every country in the world. France has had a constitution, and later on, certainly after the American Constitution, which was very similar to the American Constitution. What made our Constitution different was what rights it protected. You see, there are rights established here in the Constitution, but they were the rights, they weren't the fundamental rights. The fundamental rights don't come from the Constitution. They come from God. And so those fundamental God-given rights, and the Constitution is there to do the one thing. Everybody remember the movie City Slickers? The one thing that Curly used to talk about. Not Curly from the Three Stooges, the other Curly. The one thing. I remember in that movie, the one thing was whatever that was to you. Well, America, it is the one thing for all Americans. You know what unites us? The Constitution was there to protect the God-given rights that you were given so you could pursue your dreams, you could live your life, reap the fruits of your labors, provide for yourself, your family, your community, serve the God that you were called to serve, and build a great country from the bottom up. That's what America is all about. It's what pulls us together. It is the difference between two visions of America. It's a vision of America that says, no, we reject that idea. You know, it just didn't work. If you read President Obama's speech in Kansas a few weeks ago, if you read some of his closest advisors, they are all saying now, free markets don't work. Capitalism is a failure. Individualism is a bad thing. And that we need more government. You need to trust the government to do more things for you. You will be better off. You will be better off if we tell you what health care, or what light bulb, or what toilet you have. Right? What loan you're going to get. We're going to tell you, if you're the Catholic Church, that you have to provide for contraceptive and abortifacients in your insurance policy, because we know better than you do. This is what the Obama, and you know they just lost a Supreme Court case again with churches, saying who they can hire for their minister jobs. This is and they're fighting. The Obama administration continues to fight to be able to restrict your liberties because they don't respect your fundamental rights. They believe they have the rights.
One term.
And it's their job to redistribute them. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most important election in your lifetime. Right? It is about fundamental values. It's about someone who believes that America's best days are in their past, and that we need a government to redistribute wealth in America. If you go back and look at President Obama, who was running for office earlier, he was asked a question. He was a constitutional professor at the time. What provision of the Constitution would you add if you were president? And his answer was, I'd have a constitutional amendment to allow for the redistribution of wealth. That is a fundamental misunderstanding of what America is all about. And when you rob people of the ability to keep the fruits of their labor, when you tax them and you take and you regulate, ultimately you're not redistributing wealth, you're redistributing poverty. And that's what is in store for America unless we change, and change now. I want to cover one other area because it's important. I've talked a lot about America and what's going on here at home. But there are as big a threats around the world and at our border as there are here in America internally. I served 8 years on the Armed Services Committee. I spent a lot of time and effort studying and working before and after I left the United States Senate on the Middle East, and particularly the problem of radical violent jihadism. This is an existential threat not just to Western civilization generally, but in specific to the state of Israel, our closest ally in the Middle East. And there will be a moment or moments where America's resolve is going to be tested in the next 4 or 5 years when it comes to Iran and other countries in the Middle East who seek to do grave harm to the world and to the Western world in particular. And the question is, who will be at the till? Who will be in the Oval Office when that moment comes? Will it be somebody who has experience, someone who has thought through these issues, someone who has had a consistent, strong, and principled record, someone who went out before it was in the popular lexicon to talk about these problems and advance the cause of fighting against radical Islam? I did it when I was on the Armed Services Committee before the events of 9/11. I did it afterwards on passing 2 major pieces of legislation, along with a great Congresswoman from South Florida, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, who was my sponsor in the House. She was one of the principal sponsors in the House. I was the principal sponsor in the Senate of bills dealing with Syria, bills dealing with Iran, bills that passed that helped delay the Iranian nuclear program. It was the first bill that was focused on the Iranian nuclear program, and we did so and we drafted it before the CIA even admitted it was a problem or there was a program. So, if you look at my record, look at it with respect to someone who was able to look at a problem that was confronting this country and confronting our allies, and see whether they got it right, they analyzed it right, and they had the appropriate measures to put in place to make sure that we solved the problem. I'm looking at the problem of Iran right now. I've analyzed it. I've been studying it closely for 10 years. And we put forth a plan, unlike any other person in this race. And we've been very specific. If you're going to elect Rick Santorum as president on any issue, you're going to know what I believe, and you're going to know why I believe it. We're going to be accountable to you. We trust you. I trust the American people with the information and knowledge Because what a good leader does, he doesn't tell you what he's going to do. He tells you what the problem is. He tells you what the options are, and he gets consensus to be able to act in the best interest of our country. That's real leadership. I will look in the camera and, as a candidate and as president, and I will say to the leaders of Iran, under a Santorum administration, you will not get a nuclear weapon. We will have a policy in place. It's out there on our website, and it's very clear about the steps we will take. We will look into the camera and talk to the Iranian people. I've met with a lot of expats from Iran who have escaped Iran in years past. And I know that the Iranian people who were part of that Green Revolution are being oppressed by the mullahs and by Ahmadinejad. They're being terrorized, they're being tortured, they're being killed. There's no group of people that is hurting more or is more threatened by an Iranian nuclear program than the Iranian people themselves. Because they are the ones who are going to pay the consequences ultimately for what their government is doing. And the United States over the past 3 years, as the people of Iran attempted to rise up, attempted to do what we all want to see done, which is to get rid of the theocratic, radical, Islamist regime. And the United States of America has not even lifted their little finger to help them. We could have had an opportunity to overthrow this government, and we chose to do nothing. Well, I will tell you that I will help them in every way I possibly can. We will do everything we can to undermine that government. We will do everything we can to stop the production of a nuclear weapon. And if we reach a point where I believe the only thing that will stop them from this program being realized and having a nuclear weapon, I will make a clear declaration to the Iranian government that you either open your facilities, you begin to dismantle this nuclear program, or we will dismantle it for you. Yeah. Contrary to what some people will say, that is not an act that will start a war. That is an act that will prevent a war. That is not an act that will result in a nuclear exchange or problem. But that will make sure that Iran, this equivalent of Al-Qaeda government, only it's Shiite as opposed to Sunni, but they're just as radical as the people who run Al-Qaeda. Their theology is identical, again different strains, but identical in their fundamentalist version, jihadist version of Islam. We cannot allow the equivalent of Al-Qaeda to have this weapon, not just because they may use it. Obviously on the state of Israel is one that they have mused about doing in the past. But just as important, having a nuclear shield, having a nuclear weapon that is a deterrent from any country attacking you or destabilizing your government will give them carte blanche to spread a reign of terror around not just the Middle East, but here in America, here in Florida, here across Western civilization. The fundamental security structure of our country and the world will be dramatically changed, and we need a leader who can stand not just to the Iranians, but can stand as a Republican nominee against Barack Obama, call him on his failure after failure after failure to stem the tide of radical jihadism in Egypt, in Libya, in Syria, in Iran, creating greater and greater threats to our close ally Israel, and creating greater threats to Western civilization. We need a strong, principled leader. Someone who can present not just a clear contrast on the economic issues, but on the national security issues which are so vital. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very appreciative of you coming out here today. This is a watershed election. There's no election that you will vote in that will have more consequence to your children and grandchildren. If we are not successful in putting the right nominee up and rallying behind that nominee in the fall to win the state of Florida, then I fear that we will be the generation that will be looked at. You will have to sit down 10, 15, 20 years from now as you talk to your children and grandchildren and say, well, yes, it did happen on my watch. Don't let that conversation ever occur. Do everything you possibly can to make sure that we have a principled constitution, limited government, strong national security, believing in the integrity and dignity of every human life, believing in the integrity of the family and marriage, believing in those foundational institutions of our society, that strong visionary can be our nominee. Don't shrink. Don't shrink. The last time we had a big election like this, where we had a president who was driving our country to decline both here at home and overseas, was in 1980. And in 1980, the people of Florida were asked to compromise, to take someone who was, well, not a conservative, but could win the election. Someone who was more moderate. Well, thank gosh, the people of this country, the people of Florida said, no, we're going to take someone who is exactly what America needs. Not what the pundits and the pollsters say, but what we know in our hearts is true. Someone whose name was Ronald Reagan. And it made all the difference. You ignored the pundits. You ignored the experts. And you chose Ronald Reagan before he was Reagan. We all can say, oh, well, Ronald Reagan, oh, he was great. That's because we knew him as president now. But when the people in the Republican primaries across this country were told that they had to settle for less because this guy was too conservative, this guy was someone that would be a hard time winning an election. He wasn't electable. The biggest hit on Ronald Reagan was he was unelectable. He won 49 states. This unelectable baloney is simply that. Baloney! You need somebody. We need somebody who believes in you, who can rally the American public, who can convince us that yes, we can do for ourselves. We don't need government. We can be strong again. We can be a great nation again. We can be the country that will lead the world again. We can be the country that our ancestors gave to us, and we can be a greater country that we can leave to the next generation. I want to thank you all very, very much for being here. Thank you. God bless you. God bless America. Thank you.